Elevators are a common meme question and concern, constantly brought up in criticisms, angrily ranted about in our community forums, and generally loathed online as a whole. All the while, in a somewhat ironic twist, there are no elevators in Star Citizen. Let me explain, so don't start yelling at me yet. I've not lost the plot, not yet anyways. Sure, we have boxes we stand in that take us from where we are to somewhere else. Sometimes it even takes us to where we want to go, and other times it's the depth of the abyss destined to float aimlessly inside the world unless we perform the sacred backspace ritual and sacrifice ourselves to the Lord of the Deep Cthulhu himself, where he takes his toll in the form of our corpse and inventory to nourish his corporal form. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. But no, they're not elevators, not in the traditional or in-game sense. Elevators have been a sticking point for the community and people outside looking in for years at this point, from implementation when they would often abduct you at random in stations, simply not appear or kill you when you enter them. But why is a simple elevator such an issue? And what's going on behind the scenes to make it so? To answer that, we first need to ask ourselves and answer the question, what is an elevator? Then, how does it work in a game? Traditionally speaking. Out here in the really real world, an elevator is a lift or a carriage or platform used to vertically transport people or things, most often between floors or difficult elevations, hence the name. It runs on a set of rails or cables and works in a singular defined trajectory via linear motion. Simply put, it goes up and down only. In most video games, an elevator or lift is a simple scripted trigger system. The player walks onto a platform, which starts an animation moving the platform along a fixed path, usually vertically, between predefined waypoints. While moving, the platform typically carries the player along by a process called parenting. Many games often take advantage of the closed-in nature of elevators by doubling them as subtle loading screens, streaming the next area while the ride plays out, while others quite often teleport the player to the next location, bypassing the ride altogether. So why is it that the ones in Star Citizen are so hard to get right, and what makes them so different? Unlike other video games, be it single player or multiplayer, Star Citizen does not use a traditional method for their lifts, as they simply wouldn't work in this use case. In Star Citizen, the objects we call elevators don't move as we previously defined, with the closest analogy of that being the glass elevator from Willy Wonka. These platforms in Star Citizen are required to move in any direction as needed by the individual player at any given time, varying players up and down, left and right, curving, moving to avoid other platforms and collisions, basically in any direction to any number of destinations. Now to do this, CRG has built them like they're a small independently simulated vehicle wearing the skin of an elevator, all riding on the same netcode backend as spaceships. So the reality of stepping onto an elevator and selecting your floor is in actuality a multitude of calculations needing to be resolved. With every ride comes a complex bundle of distributed system problems, having to take into account precision handoff, server authority, streaming order, grid parenting, animations, object container authority, player position, and much more. It's far more complex than the more common simply playing animation. Star Citizen's elevators get a lot of hate, and the reputation is mostly deserved. It's a leading claim to the game, never seeing a release. If they can't get an elevator right, then they'll never get the game right, or something to that extent. And to the outwardly tech-ignorant crowd, I can easily see the misunderstanding. Now some very quick cleanup before we continue. I won't be covering freight elevators or ship elevators, as that's a whole new kettle of fish. And secondly, I lied. In fact, there are elevators in Star Citizen. Well, one of them, this one, the ASD facility Site B area. It's a beautiful example of an angular Akira-style elevator, and as a fan of both angular elevators and Akira, I think I owed it to everyone to point it out. Also, maybe the underground bunker lift, simply by definition, if not by tech. So why is it so hard to build an elevator? Well, it's because they're not elevators. Not in the conventional sense. Now with all that aside for a second, if you're in this far I must be doing something right, so if you're feeling it, give that sub button a tickle. Back to it. In Star Citizen, an elevator car is treated as its own physics grid, the same underlying system used for ships, trains, and space stations. That in a nutshell is pretty much the root cause of everything that goes weird about them. A physics grid is a local coordinate frame that can move independently through the game's much larger 64-bit double precision universe. Anything riding inside that grid, you, your cargo, or other players, has to be reparented onto it, have its reference frame swapped, which means having its position reconciled between client and server as the grid moves continuously. What actually happens when you use one of these? Well, first up, you've got a call to the queue logic. The terminal panel talks to the server-side controller that manages where the car is and who's requested and what floor. It's responsible for sending the car to you and handling all the transitions and informations after that. A grid transition. When you step in, your character has to be handed off from the station's static grid to the elevator's moving grid. If this handoff doesn't complete cleanly, you can end up falling through the floor, or the game not registering you as inside the car at all. Streaming and instancing. Because Star Citizen streams the world in and out based on where you are, a moving elevator has to make sure that the floor and the room geometry exists before anything is placed on it. Community bug reports describe players and objects spawning or arriving before the elevator floor exists and therefore falling through it, leaving ghost slots in the grid that remain marked occupied even though the player or physical object has fallen through or left. Ultimately, this leaves the slot bugged and inaccessible. The server authority reconciliation. The server, not your client, is the final word on where the car and its contents are. When that reconciliation lags, you get the classic door opens to nothing there bug, or the player randomly being abducted by a moving elevator as server and client are out of sync. Why then do they fail so often? The short answer is scale, server lag, and multiplayer. The long answer is a bit more complicated, but let's break it down. Floating point precision and handoff. Moving between the station's large-scale coordinate system and small local physics grid is generally a hard technical problem at any scale, especially when many players and many grids are active in one server instance. Desync between client prediction and server truth. When your client shows you standing in a moving box, but the servers have you in often a slightly different location, as the server has its own idea of where that box and you are. When those diverge, you get rubber banding, clipping, or getting stuck. Zone instance boundaries. Hangar elevators in particular have a history of ships and/or players clipping through the geometry when the elevator spawns before the floor collision does. Most cases, it all boils down to server performance and latency. Once a player comes out of sync with a server's location data, it's inherently difficult to correct wrong player to server positions. If the lag or the interruption isn't addressed or can't adjust in time for the visuals, often made worse by the constant calls to the server and more people trying or retrying for the same elevator with each new call then having to be processed, we end up with a bunch of players dead or stranded or simply unable to call or use elevators at the same location. These areas, compounding with other issues, can eventually cause to server instability, making all the problems worse and causing server crashes. CIG has actually acknowledged the transit system as a systemic problem and is in the process of a ground-up rewrite of the whole transit stack. Elevators, trams, trains, hangar doors, specifically to make them all compatible with server meshing, while a planned self-repair system is meant to let stuck elevators recover automatically. Essentially, with the rework and the ongoing server improvements, elevators and other similar systems should continue to improve, and if the Grimhex test for the tech is anything to go off, we should be in for some fairly smooth rides. Personally, I'm still not convinced. My running theory is that all elevators in Star Citizen are secretly mimics. Let me know your elevator horror stories down below, and if you liked what you've seen, hit that like and smash that subscribe button, and as long as the lists don't get me, I'll see you in the next one. Hooroo!